Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Kingdom Kommerce. We do commerce the Kingdom way. I am your host, Cooper Peterson, joined by co-host Luke Reichpost,
Thank you,
sponsor Scott Moffitt, and sponsor Joe Abraham. It's a good day to be here. One of the topics we're going to be talking about today is an opportunity worth pursuing? And recently we were all at a pitch event, and just to start, we saw a lot of contestants. What were some of the things that you saw that made their opportunity worth pursuing as you were the judges in the winners?
I think there's kind of two, from my perspective, there's kind of two different, criteria that I would look at. One is the passion that the individual has for the idea. If there's not a really innate, strong desire and passion for that product or that segment or whatever they're doing, then I don't think it's a great idea for them in particular. So that's kind of the personal side of it, and I think the other side of it is the idea itself. The upside, and we'll jump into a little bit more of what those criteria are, but just the metrics of what we call white space, so the opportunity, the competition, the competitive landscape, and and the merit of the idea in and of itself. But the idea can be great, and if it's not really someone's true desire and passion to be operating in that space, when the going gets tough, it's I don't know that a lot of people would persevere through that. And then vice versa, you can be extremely passionate about something, but if there's not enough white space or opportunity, that can be a challenge as well.
Yeah, Scott, I would agree with all that. At the end of the day, entrepreneurship is about finding a problem and coming up with a solution. So lots of people come up with problems, identify problems and solutions. I was listening for, man, is this a real problem? And has this person come up with a real solution? And are they passionate about it? Those are kind of the big things to start the conversation.
And Joe, what do you think about when you have, there was one product, for example, that, we saw that had a very close competitor, right? Mm-hmm. So in that scenario, so there's not necessarily a problem unless you would consider the price point of the competitor a problem, because in this particular scenario, I think the direct competition was $260, $270, and what the individual was pitching at about, I think, $89 price point. So in that scenario, it's not a problem, more of a differentiator. Do you see more value or less value in kind of, okay, maybe this is a better way and we can come at a lower price point?
Yeah, the way I saw it in the same problem solution thing, what I loved about that entrepreneur was the problem was still the problem, right? It was motorcycle gloves, people getting injured. He saw the problem as the price point of the current offering, that people were being priced out of the market and therefore bypassing safety. And he felt that was his passion driver. I don't want motorcyclists wearing crappy gloves just because they can only afford $100 gloves. And so that was his problem that he wanted to solve by figuring out how to drop the price and still provide a quality product. So in that sense, he was doing problem solution. But to your point, we were trying to help him think about, well, how do I still differentiate from something that's already in the market, already established, already has a brand, right? You were guiding him through that, and that's just as important once he's figured out where his kind of sweet spot's going to be.
The price was the problem. What's interesting is when I'm, in Ideal Strategic Partners and all the inquiries that we receive, sometimes it actually happens quite often where people will reach out and they'll be on fire for an idea or a concept, mm-hmm. right? And they will, share that concept or idea, and I'll have my team kind of do some light digging and figuring out what the competitive landscape is, and we'll end up finding something that, sometimes is exactly what they've described or very, very similar. And when I share that with people, I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's very deflating to them. And that's where, from my perspective, that actually, I look at it completely the opposite. To me, that validates mm-hmm. that there's a need or desire for that product or that idea in the market. And it gives you a roadmap, right? So you can look and you can see, what have they done right? What have they done wrong? So I can do more of what they've done right. I can replicate some of those activities, so maybe the marketing or, the the benefits to the product or solution, and then where have they stubbed their toe?
Yeah.
You know, where have they had some negative reviews or fallback, and then be able to differentiate. But sometimes people think, well, first to market is the best, and then we can unpack that a little bit, because there's you know, first to market can be a benefit, but it can also, you're the guinea pig, right? I mean, you're going to learn.
Yeah, to your point, if Lyft wasn't bold enough to look at Uber and go, they already have the market, but we see a little tweak here, a little adjustment here, a little something else we can do to be different and still be successful, we'd only have Uber, right? They did exactly what you're talking about. And so just the fact that there was already an Uber in the market doesn't mean that the idea wasn't viable to start Lyft. They just had to do some homework and say, how are we going to do just a little bit better or different than Uber does?
So you would say you don't have to be an inventor to be an entrepreneur?
No.
No.
It's actually way riskier and way more costly to be first to market, and than to be second, third, or fifth.
Could you unpack that a little bit?
Well, you have to think about it, right? I mean, if there's nothing on the market, there is a chance that you have just come up with this brilliant idea that for hundreds of years no one has thought about. And so when it comes to new technology, that happens often more so in technology than it does in products or in services, because you know, it usually is a reason why something hasn't been brought to market, or it has been and it's just fallen on its face, right? It hasn't been successful. I believe competition breeds success. So, you know, and I use that Uber and Lyft analogy all the time. I also will talk about, well, imagine if Burger King said, well, McDonald's has already got the market covered, or Wendy's said, you know, they're already making hamburgers, so we should probably just throw in the towel, right? And look,
or people love hamburgers, so let's never start Chick-fil-A. You know what I mean? Like, there's always a little twist. There's always a sub-segment of a market to go after if you're passionate about it.
So then what might you say are some key ingredients or like characteristics that you're like, without these, even for us and our audience and those listening, these are what makes an opportunity worth pursuing? This is what stands out to me first and foremost if I'm looking at it from a investor or a mentor or an advisor point of view.
Yeah, I'd love to look at it through Scott's lens. So let's have Scott give us some criteria, because the beauty of what him and his company do is they help the entrepreneur get past their own nonsense in their head and do the homework to say, okay, so you have the idea, is this viable? Is it viable enough for us to take time and money and talent and staff and all that to invest in you? I think this will be a pretty good checklist he's about to run us through, and then we can unpack it with him.
Yeah, so the metrics, and we'll get in the weeds a little bit, but the metrics are, and we focus primarily on product-based companies and technology.
And I can cover service. If you do
service
product,
and brick and mortar is a different animal. You know, that with brick and mortar, it's a little more of, if you build it, they will come. With products, you really have to know who your market is. You have to know what they're looking for, what the right market fit is for that market, not what you think it is, not what you hope it is, but what you can prove and validate, and then where they make those engagement or purchasing decisions. And so the key metrics that we kind of high-level metrics is the TAM. So TAM, total addressable market. What's the size of the market, right? Are we in a niche space, which isn't always a bad thing, but having enough, you know, being able to gain 5% of a $5 billion market is pretty significant if it's a large enough market. Compound annual growth rate
of the industry.
And sometimes you have to kind of combine industries. If it has a little bit of, let's say, there's a project that we're working on. If there's something that is maybe a furniture solution, but there's an educational component to it. There's different things where you can look at different industries and kind of compare and contrast the data and find what's relevant. But you don't want to be swimming upstream. You don't want to go into a declining market. It's like opening I'm going to age myself a little bit. Do you guys know Blockbuster?
I know Blockbuster.
Okay.
Well, they read about it. They read about it in their business classes.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, you wouldn't want to open up a video rent, a DVD rental company at this point. No matter how great your customer service is, or the newest movies, it's just not a market you would want to go into. It's a declining space. Personally, I think that a lot of retail, like retail stores, are declining space because so much shopping is done online right now. So, you're automatically kind of starting behind the eight ball. It's a little bit of an uphill battle just from that perspective alone. And then, really, this is, I think, what's one of the most important parts is really doing an in-depth SWOT analysis. So, SWOT, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. for all competing products, services, or companies that produce those products or render those services. Being able to figure out what they do well, what they don't do well, where their opportunity is to expand in the marketplace. It's like preparing for any type of a battle or a pitch, or you don't just want to kind of show up and let's see what happens, right? Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And so knowing what you don't show up to a gunfight with a knife, all these adages, right? You need to know who your competition is, so you can really identify what those key differentiators are.
And on this competition thing, and we'll come back to you guys for some follow-up questions, I found that early stage entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs, can be somewhat delusional about competition because they fear for some reason, and I was like this, so I kind of understand why. The fear is if I identify a competitor that's bad, so I want to be in this world where I have no competitors, and so I would just caution anyone listening, you want an environment with competitors. You want to go hunt for competitors, even if they're slightly adjacent to what you're doing, and you believe what you're doing is fairly unique. There's somebody servicing that customer with a current version of a solution or product. You may have come up with a better mousetrap, but for now, the customer is having the need met somewhere. Taxis served the customer need till Uber showed up. But if Uber didn't see taxis as their competition, if they're like, oh no, our stuff's going to be so much better, taxis aren't even competition for us, they'd be dead in the water, right? So to your point, Scott, I think we as entrepreneurs should be hungry to identify our competitors so that the SWOT we do is the most accurate SWOT versus the delusional version of I have no competitors and my SWOT is blank. Right, and then I go make all the mistakes.
And be honest with yourself. I mean, you're saying the same thing, but like really, the delusional aspect. A lot of people will paint this picture, sometimes in an overly optimistic way, and sometimes in an overly critical way. Right, and so try to be as non-biased, positive or negative as possible, and be objective with looking at your competition. The competition exists because there's a need. Right. I mean, it shows that there's a need. So understanding how much of the market they have, how much market share you could gain. I mean, those you'll continue to dig into as you really get to know your market. And then I would say that the next part, and maybe the last part we'll talk about for now, is figuring out who your target audience is and what they're looking for. Right? A lot of times people have an idea or what's important to them, and they may represent 70% of the market, but that 30% may be the bigger spenders. They may be the more important people to understand. So who is your demographic? And that will expand over time, but initially when you're launching a new product, a new service, a new business in general, you really want to understand what is your low-hanging fruit, your path of least resistance, where you can really prove out your concept, get some market elasticity, get your brand recognition out there a little bit, and then start to expand, right?
Scott, would you be able to give us an example potentially of one of your portfolio partners where you've actually gone through this process with them?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of examples.
You're wearing a cool hat.
Yeah. So Aquablocks is the founder. His name is Paul Shepard. Really, really close friend and business partner, as we have equity in this company. So Paul's in an interesting space, and this is an example of looking at a couple of different sectors because there's really no direct competition to Aquablocks. Aquablocks is a children's STEAM toy. So used to be STEM, now it's STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So it's an educational water toy. So basically you bring a water hose, you plug it into the connector that comes with the kit, and it's a 30-piece set. Foam blocks with plastic connectors that you can see through, and so you turn the hose on, and you can do literally over 1 billion different builds with the base set, and it ends with 2 sprinklers. So I mean, when I was a kid, I used to love running through the sprinklers.
Oh, sure.
So there's the movement, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in future episodes. But the movement is so important. The movement is get kids off screens. Right? They're inside. Get them outside. Get them having fun. Get them doing the things that we had fun doing as kids. And I say we. I'm thinking of talking about you and I. I don't know if you guys ran in sprinklers, but I sure loved it as a kid. But there was really there's no direct competition. So there's STEAM toys, right? And then there's water toys. Yeah. So there's like outdoor water toys and like build a balloon and a lot of different things that you can do, pool toys. but to have a steam and a water toy, you're kind of combining. And so they've found a real niche area, and we actually went to the toy fair at the Javits Center in New York City, and that's where we did our launch. 4-day event. Javits Center blew my mind. It was my first time there. It's like a football stadium, probably bigger. Yeah, of 4 stores. I mean, Lego was there, Mattel was there, all the big brands and names. And you know, we were in the bottom floor where the first year presenters are, and kind of the basement, right? And the first day, halfway through the first day of the show, we had one of the very large companies in the space come down with their executive team and say, how much to buy you out? And we hadn't even sold a unit yet. We had figured out what our differentiator was. You know, we built a brand. We had a mission statement that was not only get kids outside again, get them off their screens, but have them learning, have them innovating, have them building, right? And that was a combination of having to figure out what that market was. So we're launching. Actually, as we speak, we're going to the Toy Fest in Las Vegas coming up soon, and that's going to be a lot of fun. But that's just one example of, you know, figuring out. We thought that there was going to be more out there. There's some indoor steam type of toys that have a similar kind of experience, but getting them outdoors, having the water fluid dynamics, we had to kind of compare a few different industries and figure out where.
But that's a great example of, they did the homework of total addressable market at TAM, right? Then they looked at what's the industry growth rate. Is this an industry we should be in? The compounded annual growth, right? Mm-hmm. Then they did their SWOT, which was important to do to figure out, okay, there's a few adjacent products, and then what's the first offering we're going to take to market, and how are we going to message it with this, what you guys call the movement,
right? And
all those things kind of came together to take that product to launch.
That's awesome. What specific, did you do any surveys or market research? Could you explain that a little bit?
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of times when you talk about surveys, you're like, well, let's survey the kids, and 9 times out of 10, kids aren't the ones making the purchasing decision. Now, the one time is because it's called the pester power. So they'll pester their parents so much until the parent says, fine, I'll buy it. But it's what is important to the parent and figuring out the price point. So I mentioned there was one indoor kind of version. It wasn't fluid dynamics, but it was a similar concept indoors. What was that priced at? You know, that particular product was priced about $129 or $139 base unit, and then they had an add-on kit. So we were able to see, okay, the add-on kit's a great idea. That wasn't even something that at that point was in our mind. We thought about ways it was going to evolve, but the add-on kit, and seeing that, we were able to learn and say, okay, they sell a lot of these. Margins actually are great on those because you already have the tooling and the molds built, so it's an add-on kit it's an expansion kit, really. So that's how you can kind of learn from your competition of ways that you can really increase your AOV, average order value, really get stickiness with your customers. And so we were able to learn from that and find out from parents, like, what's important to you. And then geographically, right, there's a seasonality aspect for that product, right? You're not going to go out in Ohio in February and play with a water toy, unless you're a little crazy. But I don't see you doing that. But so in the bottom third of the state, it's pretty much a year-round product. Joe, you're in Miami, I'm in Tampa. We're going on Good Morning Tampa, Good Morning Miami, Good Morning West Palm in March. And because in March, you can use that toy for the most part. Here, probably not quite yet, right? So it's identifying your market, the timing of it, figuring out what's important, price point, making sure that you figure out what people are willing to pay. Maybe they're willing to pay a little bit more if it has an additional feature or function. Maybe something's not as important that you thought it was, and by taking that out, you can cut your cost by 30-40%, right? So it's really just tailoring your solution to your market. Lack of market fit is the biggest reason why businesses fail, in my opinion.
Well said.
So we're about to go ahead and come into a short break here, but before we do that, can one of the two of you run it back and do maybe like 4 or 5 points for the audience of quick bullets, like these are the important things to go ahead and keep in mind when we're talking about what you need to know for what might be worth pursuing and like the key ingredients.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at it real quick.
Of market research.
We focus on product, in this first segment. If you want, we can cover services later.
Of course.
But as it relates to if you have a product idea, first of all, are you really passionate? And do you have a driving why to get behind this? Or was this some great idea that popped in your mind in the shower, and a week, 2 weeks later, it's just not compelling enough to drive you forward, right? So that's the first gate you have to pass. But if it's growing in desire and passion, and that inventor in you is just going, then you got to get around some people, whether it's your co-founders or mentors or professors or whatever it is, and start looking at, okay, what's the TAM, the total addressable market. Is this a big enough market where we can go manufacture a bunch of stuff and still be okay? Or are we going to build 10,000 units and there's only 200 buyers, right? Then what's the growth of that industry? Is this a growth industry or is it a declining industry? Not that it would be a yes-no outcome. You just need to know, right? So you put the right projections in place. Then let's do a SWOT. Let's start to look at our competition and say, what are we going to be doing different? What can we learn from them? Mm-hmm. That was interesting that you learned from your competition of innovations you wanted to put into your product. And then what will we start with? What's going to be our most basic, get in the market with the right target audience offering? Because the passion of the inventor, you're like, oh, we can also do this, and we could do this, and we can do green ones, and we could do long ones, and we could do, no. What's the one we're going to focus on to get into market, prove it, and then start adding from there? I think that's a good start. And if all those gates are checking, and your advisors and mentors are like, yeah, this is looking good, it's looking good, it's looking good, you probably have a viable product worth pursuing.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. We'll be right back after the short break. That was great, really hearing about all of your experience and expertise in this space. Cooper, I know you've recently had to go through some of this yourself with your company gloves. Would it be possible if you dive into this for us, for not just myself, but also the listener?
Yeah. There's three main things that I'd like to just touch on briefly, things I've learned from my mentors. The first was to do your market research. And so what I learned actually from Scott, he's actually helping me out with this. We want to find what the customer actually desires, because there were certain things that I wanted and the solutions that I thought would fit best for me, but as we learned through our surveys, that actually wasn't what the majority of my target market thought. And so we actually found that there are ways that we could pivot my product to reach a much larger size of the market. So that's number one. I think surveys are super helpful. You need to know what your customer wants. The second one was to do a SWOT analysis. And I'll be honest, I was kind of feeling the same way that you described. Was I don't want to, like, looking at competitors is kind of daunting because they have the brand recognition. They're already established. People already trust them. And so it's like every time I'd find something that was close to what my solution was, it kind of just like sent a jolt of fear.
Well said. No, that's very true.
And so it's great to hear what you're saying is, you know what, actually, it's okay. And actually, you need to look at your competitors. Mm-hmm. You need to understand how they've succeeded. You need to understand where they're falling short. And Scott, I think you mentioned this before, but looking at the 1-star reviews, you say this out, look at the 1-star reviews. That's what you told me. Look at the 1-star reviews and see what is the problem with that product. And so we did SWOT analyses and discovered a lot of really important data points on, looking at like North Face and Columbia and these top brands. And that was really helpful in finding a way to differentiate my product and solve what they were missing.
That's really interesting. I love hearing about this from you and your perspective with products, just because my experience is a lot more in the service industry. And I know for myself, I don't want to personally get into that with direct to consumer with the product space. It's not where my expertise is, not where my experience is. And so if possible, I would love to hear if the two of you have any experience or knowledge or insights in this, because I'm betting that's a large aspect of our consumer and listener.
So you're saying, how does this play in if my idea is a service business, right, of some sort, which is a majority of businesses in North America? Yeah. Very similar formula like we did with the product, but a few nuances that are specific to the service industry. So, and I'll try this to just the first story that came to mind of a business that I was involved with. They came through our accelerator in the Chicago area. It was two very smart young nurses who had felt they had figured out a solution they wanted to offer as a home care solution, right? So it's a service business. They were going to trade their time for a service fee that they were going to earn. So first things first, have you identified a problem? And do you have a solution for it? In their case, they were like, yeah, they felt like young mothers who had their child, a baby, who were also full-time workers, had a problem. The problem was babies, kind of like teenagers, they don't sleep, especially for the first 6 to whatever many weeks, right? So here you are, a mom, you're an executive or a leader in a company, you've just had a baby, and you got two choices. You can take 2-3 months off, or you want to get back to work and be superwoman again, but you're not sleeping at night, so you're waking up 3, 4, 5, 6 times at night. Then you got to go work at Perform, problem, right? And these young nurses were like, I think we have a solution. And I'll come back to this story later in some future episodes, because there was a lot of marketing tweaks that got made. There were business model tweaks that got made. So I'm just setting this up. But how they went through the, is this viable question, right? They had identified a problem, and their solution was going to be, we'll go provide in-home nursing care so that the mom can sleep. In other words, we'll be with the baby. So we'll put someone in the house who will be with the baby. Every time the baby wakes up, get fed, clean him, put him, and mom gets a full night's sleep. Cool solution. The question becomes, well, how is the customer need being met today? Because somehow, some way, this goes back to what Scott said, there's no new thing on earth. The customer has already figured out how to adapt and have the need met somehow. So it's important to figure out, okay, how are they handling it today? She's taking time off work. Grandma's coming over. You know, somehow, some way, or dad's staying up, and they're trading nights. There's a solution in place now, however inconvenient. You need to understand the current solution to then ask the question, how is our solution going to be different, right? Or better, or cheaper, or more efficient, or whatever it's going to be. And so I think for them it was, the way we're going to be different is, we're going to have a professional, someone this mom can trust. It's not dad who's kind of figuring it out and doesn't know how to do diapers. It's not going to be grandma who could oversleep. This is a trained professional nurse who's going to take care of everything. And if there's some complication and the baby's not breathing, this person can handle it. So that's going to be our value proposition. Okay, so they're kind of checking the boxes on how they're going to do it. So then the question becomes, well, what will it cost? Because the customer's handling it somehow right now. If I'm going to now offer this new service that I think is great, is it something that I can offer at a price point that the customer will pay for? And if so, what segment of customers? Because there's a lot of babies being made, but not every baby being made that family can afford what I'm about to bring to market, right? So it helps me identify my market. And then the big question in service businesses is this going to be a lifestyle business, or is this something I intend to scale? Because when it comes to service businesses, you can build a great business where it's just you. Yeah. At the pitch event you mentioned, there was a great service business where this young gal was going to be a coach to equestrian riders, right? If she just was going to run her own business and be a coach and all the ideas she came up, wonderful. There's millions of entrepreneurs.
And she'd love
millions of entrepreneurs who start businesses where it's just their time, their service, and they make a great income. But if your vision is, I'm going to have lots of people working for me and we're going to scale this across the country and it's going to be, then you've got to say, okay, then I've got to be able to price this in a way where there's a 3 to 5 time markup in my pricing to sustain hiring, developing, paying, running overhead and all those things. And that's where your idea may not be viable. It may be very viable for you to run your home business or your care business or whatever it may be, lawn service, delivery service, whatever. But if you want to go bigger and scale, you have to ask this viability question of, is this big enough and can I charge enough? Is my service valuable enough? And that's what those girls had to struggle with, and in a future episode we'll unpack that together.
I can't wait to hear how that story ended up.
It played out really interesting.
But what I do want to mention, as you were talking about understanding price point, right? So I think a lot of times what people do is they'll think with their own pockets, or, well, what is that? How much is that worth? Well, in the example that you used, an executive, I wrote down while you were talking, what is their sleep worth to them, right?
If she's making $250,000 a year and runs, in a senior executive role, her sleep's way more valuable than $200 a night to pay a nurse,
right,
to take care of it and have the peace of mind that she can have a good night's sleep.
And so figuring that out, it goes back to what we talked about before, is like, what, who is your target market? Is it those executives? Do you want to have a little bit more of a wider market? What are they willing to pay? I didn't even think, as you were talking about it, having the healthcare component, but I know that, it's SIDS and people get worried about what's going to happen. So having a nurse that, God forbid, something were to happen, and they're watching, the peace of mind. It's not just the sleep and the peace of mind. That's where you start to tie in the emotions, right? And when you start to tie in the emotions, the dollar amount doesn't matter as much. You know, cost is a combination of price and value. So a lot of times people will price something like they'll
Too
say,
cheap.
well, yeah, it cost me $12 to make it. Well, I should sell it for 50. Okay, but
Because that's
what if-
my situation.
right. But what if, because that's a healthy margin, that's where I should be. But what if people are willing to pay 100? What
Hey,
if it's worth 100?
Can I give
What's
you an
worth
example?
200?
Please do.
I talked. I seriously have a bone to pick with this one brand. I don't know how they're successful, but they are. But they are proof of what you just said. Those dang Stanley cups. They're everywhere, right? It's one of the worst products I mean, okay, it's engineered well. It keeps your hot stuff hot, your cold stuff cold. But it's like the equivalent of having a chihuahua. You have to have, it takes up an entire half of your body to carry it. You can't, like, it requires a lot of space. You have to generate like 500 foot-pounds of torque to pull any water out of it or your drink out of it. Versus the cheapo thing where, you know, I can hydrate in like one sip. I take 7 sips out of a. Now, all that to say, they could have said Stanley cups cost us $4 to make, $8 to make. We should sell it for $15. What do Stanley cups sell for? 40, 50, 60 bucks, right? They understand the market. They understand that if we engineer it well enough, people will be uncomfortable with it and still pay huge sums of money for it because they built a movement, they built a brand, they built a quality product. And they didn't think of it from their own price point. They said, if we build something we think is unique, could we have it be a 7x, 10x markup and have lots of money to do giveaways and sponsorships and branding? And the answer is yes.
And they didn't. I don't know the history, but I would almost. I'm pretty confident they didn't start at a very low price point. They priced themselves at where they envisioned their brand to be, what they saw their worth being. I actually saw in the news, funny you mention it, this woman stole like $500 worth of
It's a
Stanley
movement
cups
now.
and they were in her trunk. And so, you know, Yeti's another example, right? It is a high quality. It's more of a quality. You are getting the quality there. But, you know, one of our other portfolio companies were, I can't divulge too much about it quite yet, but we're looking at the market and kind of in that market research phase right now, and we're saying, okay, you know, we're reverse engineering to get an idea and understanding of what their COGS, their cost of goods sold, are on this product, and their margins are about probably 80, 85, 90%. But when you buy a Yeti cooler, you know, or you know what you're getting.
Exactly. And like, I remember meeting, when I did my first TEDx talk in Bend, Oregon, I got to meet the young guy named Travis who started Hydro Flask. And he was pitching his idea, and his price point was going to be pretty high. And I remember thinking, dude, who's going to buy this? Like, you're going to sell this thing for $30, $35. But he was so into the quality, the engineering, the double this, the double that. He built a huge company.
I remember all like the high school girls being like, I have my Hydro Flask.
Yeah, yeah.
I have this. And they'd all go around with it. And then it would clink and hit the floor, and everyone
Becomes like a status symbol.
Yeah, so they went from Hydro Flask to Yeti to now Stanley Cup. And if any one of them had said, oh, there's competition, I should quit.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll never make it. It's not a viable idea. No, just a little tweak, a little adjustment, start a new
Sometimes
movement.
not even. Like, what's the tweak in them branding? I mean, I don't.
I think these guys made it heavier and worse to use, and it still worked.
More expensive.
It's passion. It's all.
They made it less convenient, more expensive, and now people are stealing $500 worth.
There's probably 300 of them sitting in this building alone.
Probably.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So I'd like to get more into the heart behind this topic.
You know, I'll kick it off, and then I want to punt to Joe, because I know Joe has some great ideas on this topic. But when you were talking before, Cooper, about your experience with the market research and looking at these big brands, these big names, and you know, here you are, a student in the cornfields of Ohio, and you've got this great idea you're passionate about. You know, the first thing that came to mind is David versus Goliath, right? I mean, it's truly a David versus Goliath type situation. So, in its purest form, right? David, and then you have these, you know, these massive brands, North Face, and you know, with God, all things are possible, right? And so it's, if God has given you that vision and you're asking for that wisdom. Now, North Face didn't start as North Face. I mean, they might have started with the name North Face, but they didn't start with that type of brand. So everyone starts somewhere. And so I think that if you realize that, hey, I've got the Holy Spirit within me, and as long as I am leaning into that, and I'm surrounding myself with the right people, which we're going to talk about in future episodes as well, the team, solo versus, you know, co-founder, you know, I think that's where our confidence should come from, with the slingshot and the rock. right? And being able to compete with those Goliaths. But so if you want to expound on that, I just wrote that down when you started talking.
Quick thought. I mean, even if there is failure, that may be God teaching us valuable lessons. And I know, Joe, you touched on that in some previous episodes, but even if things don't go the way that we thought, there's, I mean, huge learning experience in that as well.
The plan that God might have for any entrepreneur, it may be for utter failure in that venture, but the lesson that you take from that is preparing you for number 2 or number 3. Like you mentioned, that one bloodbath was enough in previous episode. You know, one bloodbath was enough. There was lessons that you won't make those same mistakes again.
No.
You know, because of that. So at the time, you might have been like, God, why would you lead me down this road? I've asked God that many times in my life. Like, why would you allow this to happen? And then something will come up down the road, and it's a reminder to me that, hey, if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have known what to do in this particular scenario.
Yeah, so guys, at this stage of the journey, right, when an entrepreneur is asking the question, is my idea viable? Am I on to something here, right? While you're doing the mechanics that we just talked about, checking boxes and validating things, I think it's really important as a Christ follower to always be checking your heart. Where's my heart in this? And what is my motivation? Am I drawn to this because of the money? Or am I drawn to this because of something else? The opportunity to serve others, to change the world, to be transformational. Now, there's nothing wrong with being money-minded. We don't want to be like, oh, money is evil, and I'll never think about money. No, there's a lot of, you have to think about the money. But where's your heart as it relates to the money is the question to discern through. And then, what is my counsel saying? In other words, the counsel of the word. So if this venture is drawing me to the word, to seek God and learn and get answers, and I'm almost more time in the word because I don't think I'm going to be able to pull it, that's a good sign. If this venture is pulling you away from the word, where all you can think about is the venture, the money, the this, the that, the power, the influence, your name and lights, it's probably not a good sign. Right? So the counsel of the word, the counsel of your peers, hopefully you're in a small group, right? Well, even if you're in college or a church, whatever age you may be, there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people surrounding you who you can bounce this off of and just say, hey, I'm excited. I think I've got this idea. And just have your Bible peers do a little gut check with you of, is this, again, are you going off the deep end? Or, gosh, this sounds great. And it aligns with things I know about you. And I can validate that this is a good direction for you, kind of thing. And then mentors. So your time in the Word, your time with your peers, and what your mentors or anybody you look up to is saying about your idea. So as you're doing your TAM and you're doing your addressable market stuff and you're taking it to people and saying, here's what I'm seeing, what do you think? If they're like, right? It's like, whoa, this is kind of cool. Like, I like go tweak this, change that. Those are all forms of confirmation that your heart is staying where it should be, submitted to God and under the authority of others. Because Satan's trap is, I've given you this great idea. This is great. You go be as independent and as separate and as to yourself as possible. Don't tell anyone your idea because they may steal it. Don't talk to anybody because things could go bad. That's actually a trap. It's the more you're talking about it, the more you're disclosing, the healthier things are.
And
I love that.
Encourage people, because a lot of times the people that you'll ask, you'll come with this passion, right? And so to them, they see a balloon and they don't want to put a pin in that balloon. They don't want to deflate you. So you need to really be stern about saying, look, I want the good, the bad. I want you to be raw and give me real feedback. Like, realistically, if someone just gives me positive feedback, sure, there's a part of me that's happy about that, but then there's a bigger part of me that says, they're trying to be nice, or they're not telling me like what possible concerns, like constructive criticism and being able to separate self from it. So it's kind of like what you talked about. It's not me. They're just giving me things that I need to take into account or consideration. And so that heart posture, and you talked about money. How often do we hear, that money's evil? And money is the root of all evil. People tend to leave out the love of money. So if you're doing it for money, when I ask someone what their motivation and their why is, if it's money, we're not going to be a fit. Either that or at least not yet, because you need to put more thought into it. Money is an instrument. One of my pastors talks about kingdom financiers, right? And the kingdom, God uses us. Nothing is ours. He uses what we're blessed with to be able to finance his purpose. And so if we have, as long as we keep that heart posture in mind, I think that's a big part of it. And getting real feedback, telling people, tell me what you don't like. Tell me what really concerns you about this. And be objective with it. But
right now you're really reminding me of our prior episode where we talked about mentorship and what it looked like to get a mentor, because it's connecting, and it's like, okay, I need to know when I'm looking for a mentor with my future endeavors and everything, I want to find someone who is not only Christ-centered in general to have that relationship, also for me gender specific as a guy, but someone who can still be vulnerable and that I can go ahead and trust and like be honest with me. It's going to be a great opportunity, and I just see that connection here with that prior episode that we recorded last week.
Do you have mentors at this stage, being successful entrepreneurs?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I met with one of them yesterday. And I think different people mentor me in different ways as well. Like I have some that are more of kind of my spiritual mentors, and I have some that are business. And it's great when you can find the all-in-one and the perfect. But I want to learn. I constantly want to learn, and I want to be around people who have been there and done it, because I don't want to make the same mistakes that they made if I can learn from their mistakes. I want to be able to find out, better ways to do things. So there's never a time. I'm a firm believer you should always have a mentor, and you should always be mentoring someone else. There's that humility. There's always, I've always strived to have both of those, multiple, as many as possible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my mentors I tend to pursue people who I feel are very strong biblically, like they've got a high degree of spiritual maturity, but they also happen to have a great business background. When I find that, I just go latch on. Yeah.
Would you say that you're looking for specifically in mentors for someone even my age now, or is starting their entrepreneurial journey, who's, they're the it person, the entrepreneur who went out and did it, they pursued through everything? Or is it also fine just like, hey, here's this person who has been working in corporate America doing this, they've brought products to launch. Is there a major difference between those if you're trying to come into the entrepreneurial realm?
I'll use Cooper as an example. Like, so he's a track and long distance runner, right? So when he could go and pursue like the same person who trains Usain Bolt and whatever, and say, I need to find the best of the best of the best who trains the best. It's an option, and he could pursue that. Chances are he'll have to jump through a lot of hoops and put up a lot of money to get to that. Or he could just say, my college coach or someone who was an alumni of my university who's now in a regular job but really has a good training regimen. I just need someone who's a little bit ahead of me. So that you have to discern for yourself. Do I need to find that 100 millionaire because I need all that advice now? But I think your gut is correct. You're better off with kind of taking it in stages and, let them take you as far as you can see, and then you'll see further, then find the next level mentor and then the next level mentor. I don't think we all need to go be mentored by Elon Musk. Yeah.
I like to find mentors that have had significant failures. I think sometimes people, if they're very successful right away, which I've known people who have had a lot of success and right away, and I think there's value in people who maybe wish they would have done things differently. Right.
Huge.
Maybe they never made it to that Usain Bolt. Or, they're coaching at a high school level, but they've seen some of the peers that they used to compete with do it, and they said, "I really wish I would have done this or done this." They're going to have this humility and this drive to not want you to be passionate about you not making some of the same mistakes or making different decisions that they wish they would have made. I think there's value to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you're not already, I highly encourage you to go follow us on social media at Kingdom Kommerce. Again, Commerce with a K on Instagram. Same with Facebook. And check out our website, kingdomkommerce.media. Again, Commerce with a K. You can sign up for a MailChimp there. Our first pilot episode, along with others, are currently live on Spotify and other platforms as well. So please like, follow, subscribe, whatever it may be. And with that said, Cooper, can you please pray us out for this week?
Absolutely. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to do this, the opportunity to amplify the wisdom that you've given our sponsors Lord, help us to be good stewards of what you've given us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for watching this episode of Kingdom Kommerce. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.